Welcome to Scale Smarter, the AI Growth Podcast brought to you by Novator Tech. I am Angelica Potes, scaling strategist, and today we are with Gerald Gordon. Gerald is the co-founder of REMI, helping companies hire top talent, reducing the time and cost by 50%. Gerald, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Angelica. I love that name.
Thank you. So, Gerald, I love starting with the founder story. What made you found the company and what is your background?
Sure. No, those are two loaded questions, but I'll start with my background is in engineering. So I've done traditional engineering all the way up from electrical, mechanical, and now software. And so I've been in engineering most of my life. And then my wife is a physical therapist, and that's important to the story. So my background has been coming up the ranks as an engineering with hands-on experience in software, mechanical engineering, and manufacturing. And then in my later years, I actually started working for a fintech and moved up to the executive ranks supporting software engineers. As part of that process, I had the opportunity to be in the room to hire hundreds and hundreds of engineers. And what I've noticed is that there's a common theme of trust that needs to be built to determine whether you're going to hire someone or not. And over the years, noticing this trend that you get to the place where you see their resume, you see the job application, but you're not quite sure you want to bring them in for an interview. And then that gut feeling where you decide to bring them in anyway, and then they go through the interview process, but they weren't a good fit, happened way too often. And now with the advent of AI, where you have so many applicants coming in at one time, how in the world is a recruiter going to keep up with finding the great talent before they move to another company? And we needed to find a solution for that. And so the solution is our platform called REMI, which is short for Reference Me. And it's designed to look at a person's references and the people that they've worked with in the past to determine their skill sets and how they'll be able to perform in the future. And so what we do is we spend quite a bit of time working with companies to say, instead of just accepting the application through your ATS system, why don't you filter, especially for senior level roles, based off of actual verifiable references? We're not talking about LinkedIn here, where LinkedIn allows people to add a recommendation that doesn't actually get verified. We are talking about professional references in which my team as a third party has a conversation or a mini interview with the person who wrote the reference to ensure that they're not a robot, to ensure that their background actually matches and they have the credibility in order to even write you a reference for this role. We also ensure that we're collecting it in an acute amount of time so that you're not waiting weeks upon weeks in order to collect verifiable references. And then we're asking very specific and tough questions, and we keep an audio of all of that information and we make it available to companies when they're about to hire. So you can imagine if you have a role and you've done 10 interviews for that role, how much time has been taken up by every single person that needs to be involved in the interviewing process. Imagine cutting that time down into half. Because instead of interviewing 10 people, because you're unsure of who's going to be able to fit the role, and yes, everybody's resume is perfect because of AI, using references and certified references, and I always say with a human in the loop, you can cut that time down from having 10 people that you're interviewing to 3. Well, how much is that going to save your company? So that's one aspect of what we do. The other aspect of what we do is you also notice that there's a large amount of layoffs. With the advent of machine learning and AI, what's happening is that companies have realized that they can do more with less. So they want people who are sharp and clever. They understand how to use the latest tools, which means that they can do more output than what a team of 10 people can do. And so when you change the landscape like this in such a drastic way, finding top talent is very difficult to do, especially in this climate. And so another aspect that we're noticing is that there are a major amount of layoffs. And so when you have a large amount of layoffs, the situation is that you cared for these people at some point. That's why you hired them and they did great work. But because of a business decision or because of a department that's closing, or because of the market, you decided that you had to lay off these people. Well, what happens to them? When they get laid off, they're now in the pool trying to find a new role. And you, as a company, should have some responsibility of helping them get their next role. And that's where we come in. So we will actually work with those companies, and we do it based off of a classroom setting where we bring them in, we work with them for 90 days, and most of them will actually end up with offers and new roles at the end of that time as using our process. And so our business, even though I am a technologist and I came up in the engineering space, I have a flair for leadership and I always have. And so being able to use technology and my leadership skills to help individuals in their most, I would say, sensitive aspects of their life, especially if you're looking for a new role or you're a startup and you want to hire great talent, but you know that if you hire the wrong person, is going to be costly for your business. This is where we shine the most.
Is there a minimum number of references that you have?
Suggest depending on your level. So if you're in mid level, we want 5 to 7. If you're in a VP level and above, we want at least 10.
At least 10. And it is a person that is having that call.
Yeah. So the first step in the process is the individual will write a reference for you, and we do the entire process. So we send them a link, they answer 10 questions, and then we use AI to actually create a template of references. Then that individual person just has to think about adding their information, additional information, or modifying it versus having to come up with the entire process. Once they're finished with the reference, they'll save it and it'll go into the candidate's profile. So now the candidate can use a QR code to point to all of their digital references. However, at that point, the reference is not verified. It's just created. And then at the top, it will say that this reference needs to be verified. When they click that button, they pay a fee in order to verify that reference. And once we get involved, we start talking to the person who wrote the reference to ensure that they're not a robot, that they're a real person, and that they have the skill set in order to actually provide a reference. We have a 7 point process that allows
Mhm.
us to do that. We have a lot of credibility in the industry today. And so we don't work with every single company, but companies who really care about the quality of the employees that they're getting and want to reduce the time it takes to get strong hires mostly work with us.
Okay. And have you seen, do you have competition that is doing the reference, or did you innovate it in this vertical of hiring?
So, of course, there's always competition, but the competition is less about what we do and more about companies that want to do the things that they've always done the same way. So, our competition is mostly about here is a new way to think about talent and really respect the talent that you're getting. But companies who feel like they already have a process and they don't want to change the process is usually our competition. But in general, we are one of a kind with the tool that we built and the way that we do our certifications. There's no other tool out there like this. And in addition to that, we also have a process around it. So it's not just a tool, it's curious humans who are the best fraud detectors on the planet because we're curious as to why somebody who wrote a reference said something and we're not getting a good signal, then you don't get the certification on that reference.
Okay. And how long does it usually take to find a candidate? That's one question. And then what is the success rate that you get from those candidates that you are able to find for those companies?
Yeah. So I can answer this in two different ways. So I'll start with the first way. We're seeing a huge increase on the individual who uses our services. So we have individuals who are executives that actually use our services in order to increase their profile. And those people have actually been able to get 15, 20, even 82% increase in salary because they were able to showcase their skills, not just based off of what they said, but what other people have said about them that they work with. So that's one advantage. For companies, what we've been able to do is reduce the amount of interviews that they need. So when they are looking for an executive role, you're looking at maybe people who are at 300,000, 200,000 in salary. You'll pay 20 to $30,000 just to get an executive recruiting firm to bring them in. And if you make a mistake and hire the wrong person and they have to leave 8 months later, you can imagine the amount of money that you're wasting. And so by using our system and vetting them up front and making sure that all these things are done even before they get to the interview, we save you a tremendous amount of money. We have 3 companies that we're working with right now. One of them, and they're all on my website, referenceme.ai. On that website, we have Sales Parrot, which is a company that is a startup, and they use us to vet all of their engineering talent that comes in. Evolve Squads is a national staffing firm who recognized what we were doing right away, and they were early adopters of the process. So now, when they go to clients and say, we have these clients that we would like to bring to your company, they all have gone through the REMI process. So every single client that they send to their clients have gone through our process. And the third one is Lingo Staffing, which is really interesting because this space, they're in manufacturing and they're on the floor with core craftsmen who you may think that they wouldn't need references because they could just showcase their skill. But when you get to the management and senior levels, you want to know that they work with reputable companies and been able to provide the impact that they say that they can provide. And so they also partner with us as well. And so when they are bringing in management or senior level people, they go through Reference Me as well. So you would think of us as the background check before you interview someone.
Yeah, very interesting.
After the interview, we can help with background checks as well.
Okay, that's great. And you mentioned you have 3 companies. How does Remy does to find new clients to work with your company? What's your process?
Well, we do quite a bit of marketing. So I think one of the reasons why we're on this call is because you may have seen something on LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, and all these areas. So we do a lot of marketing and presenting our, I would say, in knowledge cases and case studies so that people are aware of what we're doing. So that's one way. Another way is we join organizations. So when we join those organizations, we meet different people and then we're able to share what our product does. And then lastly, at least for me, because of my background, I get to meet many different people from many different businesses and we do our best to share that information with them. Those are usually how we get our clients.
I did not find you that way, just to let you know.
Uh,
But
okay.
yes, yes, but just curious. Since you are in the HR world, what engages the most? I'm curious. What engages the most employees to stay within a company? How important culture?
So I use the term culture multiplier, but culture is critical because you can only help an employee for so long outside of the culture. And here's what I mean by this. If you look at the difference between how you treat a contractor and how you treat somebody who's in house, there's a stark difference. When you're dealing with a contractor and you know that they're going to be there for a limited amount of time, they have less access to tools, they have less access, they're under more strict guidelines when it comes to security. And so culture for a contractor is very different than a culture for somebody who is a full-time employee. So that's one distinction. Now let's talk about the distinction of the full-time employee. Full-time employee comes in, they need to be supported. They need to know that there's growth. They need to know that this is a place in which I'm respected and the work that I do is respected. And if any one of those things are out of balance, then that's when you start seeing turnover. Because if a company does take care of their employees, then they're less likely to actually go to another company who will. Another aspect is being able to stay up to par with the latest technology as well as growth opportunities. Companies that actually train and help their employees learn on the job and actually improve their skills have a higher retention rate than those who don't. And then I do think it's also industry. There are some industries where you want to have that deep expertise, and it's not going to happen in 5 years. They may need 8 to 10 years of deep experience in this domain in order to be effective. And so you see less turnover in those spaces because the people that are there really have spent the time to understand the domain, and therefore there's less turnover. So what I'm seeing today is that our younger people who are coming into the workforce, they already have the mindset that in 2 or 3 years, I'm going to move to a new company. And so all of our companies are starting to shift around that. They're starting to understand that I may get value for 2 or 3 years. And then after that, I'm expecting to bring in new talent. So, on some cases and in some industries, maybe like the energy industry and telecom and some of these other brick and mortar industries, they tend to have more retention. But if you're talking about software development or you're talking about marketing, product, fashion, these type of areas, they're very short lived. You'll be there for 2 or 3 years and then you'll be looking for your next role. Even if you really enjoy the company, there's a level of growth that you want to have. And that's only going to come about you moving out of your current comfort zone into something else that's going to stretch you.
Yes. And for those that are looking for a new job, are there any guidelines that you suggest so they are more successful in their search?
Absolutely. I'll start with this is what I share with our clients. There are three things that you need to be paying attention to now that we never had to pay attention to before. The first one is just your experience is not going to get you hired. So you say, oh, I got 10 or 15 or 25 years of experience, and you're hoping just because of the word experience without the skills to back it up, you're going to get hired. That is not going to work this day and age. So I always tell people that you need to talk about what you are a master of. I mastered these skills. That's why I know I can provide this value to the company. So the first thing is kind of get rid of, I have 25 years of experience because that alone is not going to work. You're going to have to focus on what skills do you bring to the table. Now, as a trusted advisor, especially when you're dealing with senior folks, you cannot just say, these are the skills I have. Because if you say these are the skills I have, but you haven't shown me how it impacts the organization, that's not going to work either. So just because you worked in like, let's say you worked at Twitter, which is a well known company, and it already is going to give you opportunities for interview because it's well known, but you cannot describe how your skills provided impact for Twitter, you will also not get hired because there are so many people who are going to talk about the impact that they've had. Just because you added me to your company, this is the amount of value I can provide. If you don't have a story like that, then that's going to be a problem. So that's number two. Number three, we used to say it's who you know that will help you get the job. That's no longer the case. It's going to be who you know and who knows you because yes, it's going to be important to have relationships and have the connections, but the people who are looking for you, can they find you? And that's one of the things that we work really hard on with our clients is helping them improve their branding awareness. If I type your name and your full name in Google and nothing comes up about who you are, well, that is going to be an indication, especially if you're going for a senior role, as to whether you really have accomplished the things that you said you accomplished in your resume. See, you can be famous within your company, but if nobody knows you outside of your company, you should have did yourself a huge disservice. And so one of the things that we're doing is helping executives build their reputation back up and show people that, yes, I have skill sets that actually transcend outside of the current workplace that I'm in.
That is great. I always say your network is your net worth.
Is your net worth. Agreed.
Yes, Gerald, this has been so interesting. It is the first time that I speak with an HR company. So thank you for your input. Is there anything that you would like to add as a final comment?
No, I just really appreciate you taking the time to seek us out and give us an opportunity like this.
Of course, no. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure.